Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver DeVonta Smith is somehow both one of the most feared wide receivers in the NFL and also one of its most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. Many people will tell you that, look, he's great against zone, but he's never really been that guy who has to beat man coverage. But I just want to show you an illustration of a play they ran on the 2025 season, which is just a little Y kind of over, Y left shift into a bunch formation. And as you watch this play kind of unfold, what you're going to see here is that you can simply create free releases for players as talented as DeVonta Smith. And if you create that free release and they catch you in a zone coverage, just as what happens here, you're going to get eaten alive by this guy because he just has a feel for zone coverages that 99.9% of receivers just don't have the ability to feel out. And this guy is electrifying in the role. Now, a lot of people will tell you that you're going to need a really, really good wide receiver, basically a star, someone who can absolutely destroy man coverage on the backside in isolation, that X receiver, in order for these bunch formations to be successful. And while these are run quite frequently in West Coast offenses, and you can see the West Coast schemes here, guys, that's very much a mesh concept being run by your outside bunch and your X receiver together there, you can also kind of tell that they're condensed, guys. This is very much tight to formation. With that said, if you're just running mesh, I'm going to argue that, this is more scheme than it is individual player. And I would also argue roles can be reversed. DeVonta Smith can play different roles. This man can align at all three spots as a wide receiver, and that's dangerous. Let's go ahead and redraw this play up, and I think you'll get some semblance of what I'm saying here. Let's pretend for this particular example, DeVonta Smith is going to play the role of the isolation X wide receiver, the guy who's theoretically drawing the attention of the outside corner and the backside safety, thus taking off a lot of the attention for the rest of the receivers inside of the bunch formation. Now let's go to the bunch. Let's keep Dallas Goedert exactly where Dallas Goedert was, right? As the F kind of power, what we call the point of the bunch, and we're going to allow him to stay in that position, right? But now let's say that the inside, the actual Y receiver, the slot receiver, the inside receiver, this time it's Makai Lemon. Another guy who understands how to break down zone coverages and knows where to sit things down inside of the route. And then outside of him, let's just say that we go ahead and we take the guy that we went ahead and traded for from Green Bay because he knows the system, he knows the scheme, and he's probably run this play himself a million times in Dontavian Wicks. I would challenge these people to show me what you think has dynamically changed. Do you not believe Makai Lemon knows how to beat zone coverage? Do you really think that it matters if someone comes up and puts hands on DeVonta Smith and wastes the time and the effort in trying to prevent a mesh concept while leaving the rest of the formation completely open? I just don't understand what some of these people are looking at and where they're coming up with the ideas that they're coming up with. Because by my book, when you look at this, I think the Eagles have the personnel to be quite effective. And I still think that they can reverse roles here. I don't think you have to go with the setup I just named. I think you can play a guy like a Dontavian Wicks as a isolation, boundary side, X-aligned wide receiver. And I certainly think that he's proficient enough to running mesh concept. I definitely think that he's proficient enough to run a vertical concept, even if you needed him to, in terms of moving the coverage, the safety in that corner to the weak side of the formation. I think that he has plenty of the skill set and plenty of the experience inside the system to be effective in the role. You can take a DeVonta Smith and you can move DeVonta Smith to the outside Z receiver spot in terms of the bunch. He's the outside bunch player. Leave Dallas Goedert alone as your F, as the point in terms of the bunch. And then your inside bunch receiver, your Y, the person you're motioning and moving across formation, is Makai Lemon. I think there are multiple ways of doing this, and I even think that you can do different things with what we call the point of the bunch. It doesn't have to be a power player, right? You can use Makai Lemon there. You could technically use even a guy like Dontavian Wicks, who has all the size to be pretty effective in that role. But you can also go with speed. And with speed brings its own presentation of problems from a bunch formation. Because when you put a guy like Hollywood Brown out there, or you put a guy like an Eli Stowers out there who have a lot of speed and a lot of athleticism, that in itself can be a pain in the ass to deal with in these type of bunched, condensed to formation, condensed guys, or tight, meaning inside the numbers. So now you have to always in the back of your mind wonder, okay, what are they trying to achieve by doing this? And are we being suckered? Are we about to run an outside zone to the weak side on us? Because that's the common run call from a bunch formation is outside zone to the weak side of formation. That's generally speaking what you see when they actually try to mix it up. A lot of times what you hear that called, guys, is in the West Coast, especially like the Shanahan-esque systems, they normally will title that Wanda. That's your Wanda calls. And this versatility that the Philadelphia Eagles can now kind of bring you offensively is part of the reason that, DeVonta Smith is such a scary factor for the offense. This is a young man who is a multi-aligned wide receiver. He can play each and every one of the roles. He can play the boundary X-aligned wide receiver role. He can play the Z movement, Z flanker, if you will, role inside of an offense. And he can also play as an inside slot type player. As a matter of fact, that's the majority of the snaps he took last season was inside as a slot. In addition to being a multi-aligned wide receiver, he can actually work all three levels of the field. He's very, very good in the short part of the field. And I think this is a slept-on component to what happened with the offense when it came to the dissatisfaction of a guy like A.J. Brown. People don't realize the full story behind the production of last season and the fact that the offense had started to evolve and started to turn its wheels, not just to Saquon Barkley, but also to DeVonta Smith. Because DeVonta Smith was targeted quite often on first down to establish and start a drive. And they were using him in a lot of the short game stuff. So, you're going to see stuff like Y stick. You're going to see quick outs. You're going to see Hank in there. You're going to see slants. They worked him a lot. Whip routes. They used him a lot in that short game to start the offense, winning on first down, getting yourself into more manageable down and distances. And I'll say this. DeVonta's game, it could be expanded upon after the catch. Now, I'm not saying he's got to be like a yak guy in terms of like trucking people, but he's got to understand how to break down angles from defenders quickly and find ways of getting a few more yards out of it. I definitely think that's a part of his game that could be expanded upon. And if he does expand upon that, the level of his production is going to go through the roof because you're just adding in a lot of cheap yards. And that's how a lot of these guys end up getting these crazy totals over like 1,400 yards. A lot of that, you can account for a few hundred of that probably coming in the yak department of things. Being freed up and being able to break down angles and really take advantage of defenses. But the thing that makes DeVonta really special, it's the vertical attack element to his game. It's the fact that every corner that has to line up against DeVonta Smith, they have to make business decisions because if you come up to the line and he jams you, and you try to jam him, I should say, has a very frequent way of trying to get around a jam. He uses something that's called a split stance. So when you come to a split stance, basically what that means, guys, is both your legs come even, and then that forces the defender to commit himself inside or outside. Depending on how the defender commits, that's going to depend upon the move that DeVonta makes on the second, step to basically get free and release and where he's going to take his route. Is he going to restack the person? Is he going to fight through their arms? Like, there's just different things that can happen depending upon that. And DeVonta, his route running has never been called into question. This guy is an A-plus route runner. Even his greatest critics will tell you it's not because of his route running. This dude he's about as good as you can get as a route runner. With that said, because his vertical presence, what he can do to you vertically, because of what that does to the defense, the fact that you can't gamble on jams all the time, it sets him up to have a lot of success in the short area of the field, but also Oh my gosh, this young man is almost unstoppable. I don't know what the hell you do to shut this guy down in the intermediate part of the field, because you almost by nature have to oversell with the fear of a vertical route with DeVonta, which just opens you up for a guy like this who has just, I mean, crazy fluid hips, to sink those hips while he's running damn near full speed and stop the progression of the momentum of his body and then come back towards the quarterback to sit a route down on you instantly. That doesn't even count him being able to double move you, things like corner post, post corner, the way he's able to utilize a rocker step. I'm not even talking about all that stuff, guys. I'm just talking about how fluid this man's hips are and the reason that defensive backs get themselves tied in knots trying to cover this guy. This is probably one of the most difficult tasks that any defender is going to come up against because, yeah, he might only be like 170 pounds, but I got to tell you what, man, he has a very weird, lanky frame that is incredibly difficult to defend, and guys that are kind of tall, they're lanky almost is probably the right way of describing them. You don't genuinely expect those lanky players to also be very fluid in their hips and be able to sink and separate to create at the very top of the actual route stem the way that DeVonta Smith does. It's basically unfair. I want to return to the original criticism that was brought up in the beginning of the video. And this is the most common thing that I hear from people who are being genuine in an evaluation of DeVonta Smith as being a true number one legit wide receiver. And that's really about man coverage. And I just want to make a few points here. I think the biggest point to bring up about this topic is that I think people really, really overrate how often not only that teams are playing man press coverage, but you're also talking about using a jam technique. So you're talking about people getting physical with DeVonta Smith. Because whether they're playing man or they're playing zone, the footwork's the footwork. And if you're not concerned about the physicality at a jam, you're just making it easier for him to route you up and beat you, to be quite honest about it. But with that said, I do want to be genuine in the evaluation and say that, look, in week one, there was this controversy surrounding a clip that happened to where they kind of brought up Trey Amos's name in regards to DeVonta Smith. And Trey Amos is a young man that didn't get to see DeVonta Smith last year. He got injured. And he is very much kind of a man press corner. I mean, he's not the athlete that Marshawn Lattimore is, but I do think that it is kind of ironic that they drafted Trey Amos while at the same time having Marshawn Lattimore. And, he's not as twitchy as Lattimore, to be quite honest. Lattimore is very twitched up as a defender. At least he was in his, in his prime. And I don't think that's true of Trey Amos, but I mean, he is a guy who played in the SEC. And I mean, he has some real, competition he's faced. This is a guy who's probably going to step into the league not feeling ridiculously overwhelmed by competition, and that's a legit challenge right from week one. And I will say there are other couple of teams on the schedule that I think can come up and press you, and I'm interested to see how DeVonta Smith fares against these teams, to see if he's going to have that dominant kind of season that I'm projecting in this video. When he plays the Giants, which is twice a year on the schedule, guys, they do have Paulson Adebo, they do have Drew Phillips in the slot, and then they got Greg Newsome now. All three of those guys are big physical, cornerbacks that like to press you, and they're decent runners for being 6 foot plus. They can run a little bit. And then you look at a team like Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a very interesting team, seeing how they just signed Jamel Dean. After Jamel Dean, they have Joey Porter Jr. After Joey Porter Jr., they have Jalen Ramsey in the slot. That's a team that's going to press you a little bit. It's probably going to play some jam technique on you to try to, get a little physical with you. And while San Francisco, to me, is in the league average, I don't think that they play above the average in terms of, press technique, and certainly not in terms of, man coverage. I think they're right in the 50-50 threshold of it all. They do have, guys like Renardo Green, Diamador Lenore, and then Upton Stout in the slot. They have guys that'll come up and be a little physical with you. That'll be an interesting matchup, right? Dallas is an interesting team to watch, to be quite honest, right? Because they have this thing that they're going to go through where they have either Kobe Durant coming over from the Rams or, Revel, who was a third-round pick for them. These are drastically different corners. Kobe Durant is more of a zone corner, while, Siobhan Revel is more of a man corner. You add in Caleb Downs playing inside the nickel, playing the slot, and then, you kind of put that into perspective of their entire roster, guys, and that could be a team that you play twice a year that wants to get a little physical with you. So when you look at the Giants, Washington, and Dallas in your division for 6 games, I can understand that, but it's when you get outside the division, guys. The only team that's really on the schedule that's going to play a ton and it's going to get physical with you like that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, don't get me wrong, Indy and Chicago, those two teams can definitely play. They play a little above the league average in terms of man coverage, but the point being, guys, is no one really plays man press anymore. It's not a common thing, man. I mean, you're talking about a very limited amount of snaps. I don't really know that's something that people should be like trying to sell on either side of it. Like, oh, this guy's really good against this, so he's going to do well. Like, I think either way you look at that, man, I think you're overselling it by the percentage of snaps you see. But what I will point out is this. I do think it is factually correct, and I do think that it is a legitimate, I'm not going to say criticism, but evaluation to say the Philadelphia Eagles are trying to replace a guy who was absolutely top 10 versus man coverage and arguably top 3 to 5. A.J. Brown could beat man coverage, man. That was never the issue with A.J. However, if you look at the collective here in Philadelphia, you can see that they're going to resolve it by the collective. Dontavian Wicks, number 18 overall last year versus man coverage. DeVonta Smith in terms of like targets, guys. I'm looking at percentage of targets because the ratings are just an opinion. And then outside of that, guys, like your yards per, route run, your production markers. To me, how often do they target you when you're in man coverage? How productive are you when you were targeted? And then a subjective, like, kind of rating on how you played. So to me, I look at this, and the thing that stands out to me the most is how many times were you targeted in percent when you saw that kind of coverage. And you can see Dontavian Wicks was top 20, right? Then you got DeVonta Smith just outside the top 20. And then inside of the top 50 still, you have Hollywood Brown. It's the collective group, man. The collective group has got to get out there versus man coverage, and it's going to have to, like, earn itself here. It's going to have to earn its stripes a little bit. I will say, I'm always cautious, guys, because if you went back and you looked up certain, college players, if you went in 2019, right, and you wanted to see, I want to see the stats from 2019 to judge who's going to be available in the draft in 2020 and to do some preliminary work on what will be available in 2021. There were some pretty damn big names at the bottom of the target percentage versus man coverage when it came to college football. You would have been, CeeDee Lamb would have been casted in that role. Justin Jefferson, Henry Ruggs. And then you have the ones that you would expect, right? Jalen Reagor and John Hightower, right? But then you also have the guys you wouldn't expect. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Nico Collins. All those guys were towards the bottom of the league. I think it's important to keep that stuff into perspective that you can over-evaluate something. You could definitely be wrong in what your assumptions are here. It's definitely kind of a little bit of a year-to-year league, and you have to take into consideration sometimes there's deficiency. There's a true deficiency versus the coverage. But other times, it may be a little bit more about opportunity. You look at a Justin Jefferson who's been mostly, he's had some up and down years in the league versus man coverage, but for the most part, he's been one of the 10 best receivers in the league versus man coverage. But you wouldn't have known that from his college, analytics. CeeDee Lamb, been one of the best players in the NFL versus man coverage. There were definitely times on his college tape in terms of the analytics, he didn't live up to that. You would have definitely missed out on the evaluation if you'd assumed those guys couldn't beat man coverage, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown and Nico Collins, absolute stars. Both of those guys in the league have been pretty damn good versus man coverage. They didn't face it a whole lot in college in terms of the percentages of their snaps. I don't know, guys. My cautionary, statement here would be that I trust the talent of the team, and I don't want to do anything drastic here in terms of the approach to how you play offense. At a certain point, yes, DeVonta Smith has got to show it out there. I can understand why some people maybe don't have the confidence, but it's not changing my confidence in this young man. I think this young man is going to finally have the opportunity and the type of numbers to put up a certain level of production versus man coverage that is going to silence, a lot of these doubters. I think a lot of doubters are going to be silenced by his play on the 2026 season. I take a look at what else is on the roster. Dontavian Wicks has had a very, very, encouraging stat line versus man coverage, but it has not been expanded upon a full-size workload to make big-time claims here. I'm excited to see how he responds with an increased workload because he's going to definitely see some man coverage, no doubt about it. And then, we got the veteran guy in Hollywood Brown. The real wild card of this entire group, a guy who was very highly rated versus man coverage. He was productive versus man coverage, but he didn't see the targets. That's the issue here. He didn't have the target share first man coverage that you would expect, is Mekhi Lemon. That's the guy that's kind of interesting to see what's going to happen here. What kind of production is he going to put up in the NFL, right? Is he going to have that CeeDee Lamb and that Justin Jefferson, that Amon-Ra St. Brown and Nico Collins level of like, oh man, like in college, we didn't see this coming. But damn, if he ain't really good versus man coverage in the NFL. I think he's going to eat just because of the fact that DeVonta Smith is going to take some of the coverage off of him. I think he's going to eat just because I think that Dontavian Wicks is actually a pretty decent wide receiver. I don't think he's A.J. Brown by any stretch of the imagination, but I think he's being better than a lot of people are crediting him for. I think that that's going to help Mekhi Lemon. I think he's going to be able to eat off of that, essentially. At the end of the day, guys, I just think people are honestly overvaluing how much man coverage gets played, period. But on top of that, how many times a man press coverage comes along with a jam technique? I mean, you are literally talking about a handful of snaps on a season. And unless they elevate that to like half of the snaps, I don't think it's a genuine problem. I don't think it's a genuine concern. And if the concern is that, well, just man coverage in general without a jam technique or not, I think DeVonta is going to show you with increased opportunities, he's going to put up increased production. He's going to enter that realm, that conversation of being one of the top 12 guys or so to be able to do that. With that said, guys, I thank y'all so much for tuning in. And if you enjoyed today's conversation and you want to throw me that, thumbs up button, you want to subscribe to the channel, I would be happy to have you. Welcome to the Cerebral Football community. And if you want more content like this, if you said, hey, man, don't leave us hanging, give us some more content, I'll throw up some more like player evaluation or scheme stuff on this side of me and this side of me here. And with that said, guys, thank y'all so much, and I'll see y'all on the next video.